There's a corner of the world where olive trees sway under an endless sky and secrets sleep beneath sun-bleached stones. Here, the past is not content to stay buried. It breathes through shattered columns and silent amphitheaters, where questions echo with no reply. Who carved the temples aligned perfectly with the stars? What vanished cities lie hidden below the restless waves? And what truths did the ancients guard so fiercely they were never written down? Tonight, let your imagination slip through the cracks of time. We'll explore ancient history's most bewildering mysteries, where history dissolves into legend and every answer spawns new wonder. Our story begins in the sacred valley of Delphi. It was here, at the foot of Mount Parnassus, among whispering olive groves and the pale golden slopes of sacred rock, that a hidden chasm exhaled sweet, intoxicating vapors. This place was known simply as the Sanctuary of Delphi, the most venerated oracle in the ancient world. From the dark fissures in the temple floor, the breath of the earth itself was said to rise up. A fragrance so potent seemed to draw aside the veil that separates the living from the divine. In this sacred chamber, dimly lit by flickering oil lamps, the Pythia, high priestess of Apollo, would prepare herself for visions that might change the course of empires. Draped in flowing robes of purest white, crowned with a wreath of fresh laurel, she would lower her body carefully onto a golden tripod, positioned precisely over the cleft. There, with the echoes of old hymns circling the stone walls, she inhaled the vapors. Moments later, her eyes would turn glassy, her breathing shallow and uneven, as if her soul had departed to walk unseen paths. When she began to speak, her voice was transformed, sometimes a frenzied cry, sometimes a deep chant in rolling verse, like a river pouring from an unseen spring. People came from every corner of the known world to hear her words. Mighty kings and wandering peasants alike endured weeks of travel across barren plains and treacherous mountain passes, driven by desperation to glimpse the hidden hand of fate. No one knew exactly what caused her visions. Some swore it was the breath of Apollo himself, the god of prophecy, descending in invisible glory to possess her. Others whispered it was merely a natural phenomenon, gases rising through secret cracks in the rock. Even now, centuries later, scholars and scientists cannot fully explain why the oracle's chamber inspired such eerily precise proclamations. Among all the supplicants, no seeker's story was more famous or more tragic than that of Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia. Croesus was so rich that the saying "rich as Croesus" survives to this day. But wealth did not bring him peace of mind. Threatened by the rising power of Persia to the east, he resolved to test the Pythia. Before he dared ask her about war, Croesus devised a cunning trial. He dispatched envoys to every major oracle in Greece and beyond, commanding each to answer a single question. What was he, Croesus, doing on a certain day many weeks hence? When the messengers returned, most oracles offered vague platitudes or poetic riddles with no substance. But Delphi's reply was chillingly precise. The Pythia had described him boiling a tortoise and a lamb together in a bronze cauldron with a bronze lid, an unlikely scene he had staged deliberately to expose charlatans. Triumphant, convinced Delphi alone spoke true, Croesus sent vast offerings of gold, silver, and gleaming ingots to secure the oracle's favor. Finally, he posed his fateful question. If he should cross the Halys River and attack Persia, would he succeed? The Pythia's answer was as perplexing as it was unforgettable. If you cross the river, a great empire will fall. Croesus took this to mean the Persian Empire would be crushed under his armies. With swelling confidence, he forged alliances with Egypt and Babylon, dispatched envoys to Sparta, and readied his legions. But when the decisive moment came, only Sparta sent soldiers, and too few to tilt the balance. He crossed the Halys, and battle erupted in a confusion of arrows, dust, and thunderous cavalry charges. The Persian horses panicked at the sight and smell of camels in Croesus' baggage train, yet their retreat turned into a tactical advantage. Cyrus the Great regrouped, counterattacked, and drove Croesus back towards Sardis. His kingdom fell swiftly, proof that the prophecy had been true all along, though not in the way he imagined. The great empire destroyed was his own. And even this was not the final twist. Croesus had once asked whether his dynasty would endure, and the Pythia warned, "Know what when a mule becomes king of the Medes, then, delicate-footed Lydian, flee by pebbly Hermus, flee and think not to stand fast, nor be ashamed to be a coward." Croesus had laughed, for no mule could sit a throne. But Cyrus was the son of a Persian father and a Median mother, a mule of mixed lineage in the eyes of ancient symbolism. In the end, this mule had conquered Lydia. Such stories made Delphi both revered and feared. The oracle's words were never false, but always wrapped in shadows, demanding caution and humility. The historian Plutarch, himself once a priest of Delphi, explained that oracles spoke in riddles to soften the impact of divine truth and spare mortals the agony of certainty. If the Pythia had declared in plain language that Croesus would fail, perhaps he would have raged against Apollo himself, cursing heaven rather than examining his own pride. Consulting the oracle was no simple affair. Pilgrims first purified themselves at the spring of Castalia, washing away spiritual stains in the cold mountain water. They brought costly offerings, golden tripods, jars of precious oil, carved figurines, and sacrificial animals. The rich were given precedence, their place in line secured by gifts and political favor. Only then, after these rites and payments, would the petitioner be allowed into the inner sanctum to hear the Pythia's breathless whispers. The oracle's fame did not end with Croesus. Even the greatest minds sought her counsel. Socrates himself was astonished when the Pythia declared that no man was wiser. He spent the rest of his life testing this claim, questioning statesmen, artisans, and poets, and concluding that perhaps he alone knew how little he truly knew. And then there was Alexander the Great. Before setting out to conquer Asia, he traveled to Delphi seeking the god's blessing. When the priest declined to summon the Pythia on a day seemed inauspicious, Alexander's impatience erupted. He seized the princess by the arm and pulled her toward the sacred tripod. In that moment of struggle, she is said to have cried out, perhaps spontaneously, perhaps in surrender, "You are invincible, my son." Alexander needed no further encouragement. He took this as the final seal of his destiny. Thus, Delphi remained for centuries a place where myths and reality braided together, a place where ambition and faith met in the thin mountain air. Even now, long after the last chant faded and the sanctuary fell silent, the story of the oracle endures, a reminder that truth often wears a mask, and those who would lift it must be prepared to face whatever lies beneath. And now we move to one of the most debated pieces of evidence ever discovered, a 16th century map that appears to show Antarctica without ice. The Piri Reis Map is an anomaly in historical cartography. Discovered in 1929 by German theologian Gustav Deismann in the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. The map had been tucked away for centuries, forgotten in a dusty stack of old documents. Upon closer examination, it was revealed to be the work of Piri Reis, an Ottoman admiral, navigator, and cartographer who created it in 1513. At first glance, it seemed like a typical early 16th century world map, detailing the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the newly discovered Americas. But the more researchers studied it, the more it became clear this was no ordinary map. What makes the Piri Reis Map so controversial is a particular landmass drawn along its lower edge. Many believe this landmass is Antarctica, yet there's a problem. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after the map was made. Even more puzzling, the landmass is depicted not as the frozen wasteland we know today, but with detailed coastlines and topographical features as if it had been mapped when it was free of ice. Modern geological studies suggest that Antarctica may have been ice-free more than 6,000 years ago, long before any known civilization was capable of such precise cartography. How did Piri Reis know about this? The admiral himself left some clues in handwritten notes scrawled along the margins of the map. He claimed that his work was not original, but was compiled from multiple older sources, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He referenced maps taken from 20 ancient charts, the 8 new maps of the Arabs and Hindus. If true, this may mean that Piri Reis had access to knowledge passed down from far older civilizations, perhaps ones with seafaring capabilities far beyond what we previously believed. Some theorists argue that the Piri Reis Map is evidence of an advanced lost civilization, one that mapped the world in astonishing detail long before recorded history. They suggest that fragments of this knowledge survived the collapse of ancient societies and were later incorporated into Renaissance-era maps by explorers and cartographers who had no idea of their true origins. The theory is supported by the fact that other medieval and Renaissance maps, such as the Orontius Phineas map and the Zeno map, also depict land masses resembling Antarctica with surprising accuracy. Others believe that the map has been misinterpreted. Some scholars argue that what appears to be Antarctica is actually an incorrect rendering of South America. Mapmakers of the 16th century often distorted coastlines due to the way they compiled their charts, from scattered reports and second-hand accounts. Some parts of the world were stretched or compressed to fit the limited knowledge of the time, leading to inaccuracies that might explain the apparent presence of Antarctica. Another possibility is that early sailors, possibly from Phoenician, Chinese, or even pre-Columbian European civilizations, traveled much further than history acknowledges, documenting coastlines that were later lost to time. If so, the Piri Reis Map could be a remnant of an ancient navigational tradition that has since disappeared, leaving only tantalizing hints behind. Despite decades of study, no definitive answer has emerged. Did Piri Reis unknowingly preserve the last echoes of a lost civilization? Or is this simply a case of cartographic error, a trick of distorted geography that only appears mysterious in hindsight? Whatever the truth, the Piri Reis Map remains one of history's most enduring puzzles, a document that continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about the past. But the Piri Reis Map is not the only ancient mystery that challenges what we thought we knew about history. Thousands of years before Piri Reis put ink to parchment, an even greater enigma was being carved into stone, one that defies our understanding of early civilization itself. Up next is Baalbek, the most sanctified site. Baalbek is one of those places that seem to defy explanation. Nestled in modern-day Lebanon, this ancient site is famous for its towering Roman temples, built to honor Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus. But as impressive as those ruins are, they sit on something far older, something far stranger: the Baalbek megaliths. These stones are impossibly massive. The largest among them, known as the Trilithon, consists of 3 limestone blocks, each weighing between 800 and 1,000 tons. They're placed perfectly, stacked 12 meters above the ground with no visible mortar, as if they were gently lowered into place. But the real mystery is the stone of the pregnant woman, an even larger block weighing an estimated 12,000 tons. It still lies abandoned in the quarry, seemingly carved and ready to be moved, except no one knows how that could have been possible. Theories about how these stones were transported and placed range from conventional to controversial. The mainstream belief is that the Romans were responsible. After all, they were master builders, constructing aqueducts, temples, and roads that have stood for thousands of years. Some historians suggest that they had the means to move the megaliths using cranes, pulleys, and sheer manpower. But there's a problem with this explanation. No known Roman engineering feats come close to moving stones of this size. Even their most advanced construction projects never attempted to lift anything close to 1,000 tons. It's as if they built their temples on top of something far older. And that's why some researchers believe Baalbek predates the Romans entirely. Some accounts suggest that the site was originally built by the Phoenicians, an ancient maritime civilization that once ruled the Mediterranean. Others push the timeline even further back, claiming that the site is pre-Phoenician, meaning it could be thousands of years older than recorded history suggests. If true, that would mean a lost civilization, not Rome, was responsible for moving these stones. But if that's the case, who were they? And more importantly, how did they do it? There are those who believe Baalbek was built using a lost form of ancient technology. Perhaps the builders had an advanced understanding of counterweights, pressure manipulation, or even sound frequencies that could make heavy objects easier to move. Some speculate that the answer lies in forgotten techniques, methods of construction that have been erased by time, lost before they ever could be written down. If we knew how they did it, what else might we discover about the ancient world? And then there's the most controversial theory of all, that Baalbek stones were moved with the help of something beyond human ability. Ancient astronaut theorists have pointed to the sheer size and impossible precision of the megaliths, suggesting that Baalbek may have once been a landing site of extraterrestrial visitors. Some believe that its position, its alignment, and its construction indicate that it was more than just a temple. It was something older, something built for a purpose we don't yet understand. There's no solid evidence for this, but the idea has persisted for decades. What we do know is this: no one has ever successfully explained how these stones were moved. They remain one of the greatest engineering puzzles of the ancient world. If a civilization thousands of years ago had the capability to transport and position them, what else were they capable of? And what other secrets could still be hidden beneath the ruins of Baalbek? But Baalbek isn't the only mystery that forces us to rethink what we know about history. The past is filled with impossible artifacts, things that shouldn't exist, but do. Perhaps the most haunting thing is the simplest. If Baalbek survived, hidden all this time, what else lies beneath our feet? Forgotten sanctuaries, unmarked wonders, waiting patiently for the moment when we, too, are ready to remember. There is a book in Budapest that no living soul has ever truly read. A slender volume, bound in quiet anonymity. Its pages whisper a language that no one can decipher, a language that may never have belonged to any human tongue at all. This is the Rohonc Codex, an enigma that has quietly outlasted empires, revolutions, and every attempt to unveil its secrets. Its story begins, at least in the records we have, in the 19th century Hungary. A nobleman named Gustav Battiani presented this cryptic manuscript to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, claiming it had long sat among his family's treasures. How it came to be there, who carried it across centuries, and why, has always been as obscure as its text. At a glance, the Codex looks almost familiar. 448 yellowed pages, dense lines of script, marching steadily across each leaf. Yet stare long enough, and it feels unsettling, as though it's quietly aware that you can't understand. The writing flows from left to right in a stream of over 200 unique symbols, more characters than any known alphabet. Some are delicate and looping, others are sharp as tiny blades, all of them arranged with a precision that implies meaning. And then there are the illustrations, meticulous drawings show scenes no one can fully explain. A battle unfurling beneath an alien sun, robed figures lifting crosses alongside crescent moons, kings and saints whose names no scholar has ever spoken aloud. The imagery defies any neat category. Christian symbols blur into Islamic motifs, and hints of Hindu iconography appear without text. It's as though the book was made to transcend every boundary, religious or otherwise. Naturally, people tried to read it. In the 1800s, scholars compared it to everything they knew: Latin, Hungarian, Romanian, Sanskrit. Nothing fit. Later, cryptographers and linguists brought all the tools of modern analysis to bear, searching for patterns that would reveal meaning. But the Codex remained stubbornly silent. Its characters repeat, but never with the predictable rhythm of a real language. Its structure, if there is one, seemed designed to repel understanding. And so the theories began to multiply. Some believe the Codex is a relic of a lost faith, a text meant only for the eyes of a secret brotherhood. Others imagine it as the last echo of an extinct language, spoken by a people whose memory has turned to dust. There are those who claim it is a hoax, an elaborate 19th century prank conceived to outwit the scholars of the day. Yet, if that were true, why fill hundreds of pages with such consistent, careful writing? Why create hundreds of unique symbols, each drawn with a conviction of meaning? More than 2 centuries have passed since the Codex surfaced, and no one has proved it a fraud. No one has read so much as a single sentence. It sits now behind glass in the Hungarian Academy of Science, waiting, perhaps forever, for the one mind to glimpse its hidden shape. Somewhere in that forest of symbols, perhaps, is a story no one alive remembers, a chronicle of a forgotten kingdom, a prayer to unknown gods, or simply a message from one lonely soul to a future that would never be understood. Until the day someone deciphers its script, or conclusively proves it empty, the Rohonc Codex remains a perfect enigma. A book no one can read, filled with a language no one can name, and a secret that feels almost deliberate in the way it refuses to surrender itself. In a world where so much ancient knowledge has been unearthed and cataloged, this slender manuscript endures as a reminder that some truths, however patiently we search, may choose to remain hidden. Up next, the White Pyramid of China. Hidden deep within the remote landscapes of China's Shaanxi province, a series of enormous pyramidal structures sparked decades of speculation, secrecy, and intrigue. These are not just hills or natural formations, as some might at first glance. These are ancient pyramids, eerily reminiscent of those found in Egypt and Mesoamerica, yet shrouded in mystery and largely unknown to the world. Unlike the Great Pyramids of Giza, which stand proudly against the desert skyline, China's pyramids have been deliberately concealed by the government, planted over with trees, covered with soil, and left to be forgotten. At the heart of this enigma is the so-called White Pyramid of China, a structure so immense that if the accounts are to be believed, it may dwarf even the Great Pyramid of Giza in scale. But why would such a monument be kept hidden? What secrets could it hold beneath its layers of earth and secrecy? The first widely known report of the White Pyramid surfaced in 1945 at the tail end of World War II. U.S. Air Force pilot James Gaussman was flying a reconnaissance mission over China when he spotted an enormous, gleaming white structure rising from the landscape below. According to his account, the pyramid appeared to be made of a bright, reflective material, possibly metal or some kind of stone, and was unlike anything he had ever seen. Gaussman's description was detailed. He claimed the structure had smooth, perfectly symmetrical sides and stood at an estimated height of at least 1,000 feet, which, if true, would make it significantly larger than Egypt's Great Pyramid. Upon returning to base, he documented what he had seen, even sketching out the structure. But his report was quickly buried, lost in military archives, and dismissed as an unverified anomaly. The story might have ended there if not for another sighting several years later. In 1947, another American pilot, Colonel Maurice Sheehan reported seeing a similar massive white pyramid while flying over China. This time, the claim made it into newspapers, with a report appearing in the New York Times. Once again, the structure was described as larger than anything known at the time, with smooth, sloping sides and an almost otherworldly appearance. Despite these compelling accounts, no photographic evidence from these flights has ever surfaced, leading some to question whether these pilots were mistaken or if what they saw was deliberately erased from the public record. What is known, however, is that the region they described is indeed home to numerous ancient pyramid-like structures, most of which remain unexplored. Unlike the well-documented pyramids of Egypt, China's pyramids have been kept in the shadows, with minimal excavation and even less public acknowledgement. The Chinese government has long been reluctant to allow foreign researchers access to these sites, and some believe the secrecy is no coincidence. The Chinese pyramids, including the elusive White Pyramid, are believed to be burial mounds for ancient emperors dating back to the Western Han Dynasty and possibly even earlier. These emperors, much like the pharaohs of Egypt, were buried with vast treasures, intricate tombs, and elaborate artifacts meant to accompany them into the afterlife. One of the most famous examples of this is the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, located near Xi'an, which houses the legendary Terracotta Army. Despite being one of the most significant archaeological sites in the world, the main burial chamber of Qin Shi Huang remains completely sealed to this day, with archaeologists hesitant to open it due to high levels of toxic mercury reported in the area. Some researchers speculate that the White Pyramid could be an even grander burial site, potentially belonging to an emperor whose name has been lost to history. The reluctance to excavate these pyramids may stem from both practical and cultural reasons. Chinese authorities have often cited concerns over preservation, arguing that opening these sites too soon could lead to irreversible damage. Others, however, believe the secrecy runs deeper, that there is something within these pyramids that the government doesn't want the world to see. Some of the more speculative theories suggest that the White Pyramid could be evidence of an advanced ancient civilization, one with knowledge or technology that predates what we currently understand. There have even been whispers of extraterrestrial connections, fueled by the descriptions of the structure as unnaturally smooth and highly reflective. While such theories remain firmly in the realm of speculation, they persist due to the sheer lack of access to the site. Even today, satellite images confirm the existence of large pyramid-like structures scattered throughout the region, some covered with dense forestry, others barely distinguishable from the surrounding hills. These images provide tantalizing clues, yet without on-the-ground excavation, their full significance remains unknown. Adding to the mystery are the accounts of local villagers who have long spoken of strange happenings in the region. Some tell stories of unusual lights appearing near the pyramids at night, while others claim that for generations there have been legends warning people to stay away from the ancient mounds. Could these accounts be simple folklore? Or is there something buried beneath these structures that modern science has yet to uncover? Some historians suggest that these pyramids may hold lost historical records, scrolls, or artifacts that could rewrite our understanding of early Chinese civilization. Unlike Egypt, where hieroglyphics have provided a direct link to the past, many of China's ancient texts have been lost over time, particularly during periods of political upheaval. They could provide insight into a forgotten chapter of human history. The true nature of the White Pyramid, if it exists in the form described by the pilots, remains one of archaeology's greatest unknowns. Despite repeated attempts by independent researchers to gain access to the region, China has remained firm in restricting excavation. Whether this is due to national heritage concerns, government policy, or the presence of something that defies explanation, we may never know. What is clear, however, is that China's pyramids are real, and their secrets remain buried beneath centuries of earth, waiting to be uncovered. If the White Pyramid is indeed hidden among them, it could be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time, or it could be a mystery that is destined to remain unsolved. But what happens when an artifact is discovered, not half carved from stone, but fully inscribed with secrets we still can't decipher? One mystery carved into a rock, we move to another, one that could hold the key to a hidden treasure, or perhaps something far more mysterious. The Copper Scroll, an artifact unlike any other found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, isn't a religious text, a historical record, or a prophecy. Instead, it appears to be a treasure map etched onto metal rather than delicate parchment, listing vast hoards of gold and silver hidden in locations no one has ever successfully identified. What is this ancient document, and who wrote it? And most importantly, where is the treasure it speaks of? The Copper Scroll was first discovered in 1952 in a cave at Qumran, the same archaeological site where the famous Dead Sea Scrolls have been found. But while the other scrolls were written on papyrus or animal skin and contained biblical texts, laws, and commentaries, this one was different. Instead of being carefully written on parchment, it was carved into thin sheets of copper, so brittle that it had to be carefully unrolled into pieces. The language, though related to Hebrew, was unusual, as if it had been written in shorthand or code, and the contents unlike anything ever discovered. Unlike the religious texts found nearby, the Copper Scrolls didn't discuss theology or prophecy. Instead, it reads like an inventory, listing over 60 locations, each supposedly containing caches of gold, silver, and other valuable treasures. The sheer amount described is staggering, estimated to be worth billions in today's money. But despite decades of searching, no one has ever found any of the treasures it describes. Some scholars believe that these riches were hidden by the Jewish people during the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, perhaps belonging to the Great Temple of Solomon or the Second Temple before its destruction. Others argue that it predates the Roman era, linking it to even older Jewish priestly sects, or the mysterious Essenes who lived at the Qumran. Theories about the Copper Roll's origins are varied as the treasure hunters who have tried to decipher it. Some believe it's a genuine record of hidden wealth, a final, desperate attempt to preserve sacred treasures before they were lost to invading forces. If true, it could be one of the greatest undiscovered caches of ancient wealth in history. Others argue that it's a forgery or a symbolic text, never meant to be taken literally. The language they claim is too strange, the location too vague, and the amounts of gold and silver too extravagant to be real. Could the Copper Scrolls be an ancient hoax? Or was it a real map, one whose directions have been lost to time? One of the biggest challenges in unlocking the Copper Scroll's secrets is the locations themselves. The texts refer to places that no longer exist, or whose names have changed over the centuries. Unlike other historical treasure maps, which often contain landmarks or geographical clues, the Copper Scroll's descriptions are frustratingly cryptic. It speaks of tunnels, pools, courtyards, and tombs, but without exact coordinates. Every expedition ends in failure. In the years following its discovery, treasure hunters and archaeologists alike have combed the region, hoping to find even a small fraction of the riches it describes. Deep beneath the earth lies a series of immense, perfectly carved stone chambers. No historical record mentions their creation. No tools have ever been found, and their purpose remains entirely unknown. These are the Longyou Caves, one of the most perplexing archaeological discoveries ever made. Hidden beneath the rolling hills of Zhejiang province in China, the Longyou Caves are unlike the natural limestone caverns scattered across the region. These vast underground halls are entirely man-made, colossal chambers hewn from solid sandstone, carved with near-perfect symmetry and intricate patterns that defy conventional logic. What makes them even more astonishing is the utter absence of any documentation. No blueprints, no inscriptions, no records of their construction. It's as though an entire civilization built them and then systematically erased every trace of its existence. Their discovery was accidental. In 1992, a local farmer, curious about the deep, stagnant pools dotting his village, decided to drain one. As the water receded, an astonishing sight emerged: smooth, towering walls extending deep underground. Word spread quickly, and more villagers drained additional pools, revealing more hidden chambers. In total, they uncovered an underground complex spanning roughly 30,000 square meters, an area comparable to 4 football fields. Ceilings soar nearly 30 meters high, supported by evenly spaced stone pillars. Every surface is marked by uniform, parallel chisel lines. so precise that they seem impossible to replicate with rudimentary tools. The scale of labor required to create these spaces is staggering. Archaeologists estimate nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock was excavated. If ancient workers relied only on tools available in early China, it would have demanded thousands of laborers working day and night for decades. And yet, no tools, debris, or evidence of habitation have ever been found. No bones, no pottery, no discarded instruments. Where did all the displaced stone go? How was it removed with such precision? Why did the chambers look as though they were abandoned immediately after completion? Adding to the enigma is their meticulous layout. Each chamber is positioned with deliberate alignment, suggesting they were part of a larger interconnected plan. Some researchers have speculated they were used for storage, military garrisons, or clandestine rituals. Others proposed they were grand underground palaces for a forgotten elite. But without artifacts or inscriptions, these ideas remain speculation. One of the most extraordinary aspects is the cave's structural integrity. Despite possibly dating back to the Qin dynasty in the 3rd century BC or even earlier, the walls remain pristine, untouched by erosion or collapse. Unlike many ancient sites, the Longyou Caves appear as if they were constructed to endure forever. The uniformity of the chisel marks is equally uncanny. Every chamber bears the same methodical pattern, leading some to theorize that they were not created by conventional hand tools, but by a lost technique, perhaps even an ancient machine. Others draw parallels to megalithic sites across the globe, noting that civilizations separated by oceans have left behind similar feats of unexplained engineering. Some theories venture into unorthodox territory, speculating that builders employed sound frequencies or vibrational technology to soften the rock. While this sounds fantastical, experiments today show that acoustic vibrations can indeed affect the molecular structure of materials. Could the ancient architects have possessed knowledge now lost to time? Some suggest the caves were designed to be intentionally flooded. Sunken channels carved into the floors hint at possible reservoirs or reflecting pools used for astronomical observations. Yet, no irrigation system or drains have ever been discovered. Most perplexing of all is the complete silence of historical records. In a country famed for its meticulous chronicles, no mention of this monumental undertaking exists, not a single line in any surviving text. To this day, no one knows who built the Longyou Caves, and how they did it, or why. As exploration continues and new chambers are slowly revealed, perhaps more clues lie waiting, hidden behind unexplored walls or buried deep within the hills. Some archaeologists advocate for ground-penetrating radar surveys to uncover the full extent of the complex. For now, the Longyou Caves remain a silent riddle, a testament to an unknown people and a forgotten purpose. But China is not alone in guarding such secrets. Across the ancient world, mysteries lurk beneath our feet. In Alexandria, Egypt, another enigma lay buried for over 2 millennia, a black granite sarcophagus sealed tight, undisturbed since antiquity. When it was finally opened in 2018, what lay inside was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Let's dive next into the story of the Black Sarcophagus of Alexandria. Beneath the busy streets of Alexandria, Egypt, a discovery in 2018 captured global attention. A massive black sarcophagus, sealed for over 2,000 years, was unearthed by construction workers. Unlike the ornate tombs of the pharaohs, this one was completely black, unmarked, and undisturbed. It was the largest sealed sarcophagus ever found in Alexandria, and no one knew what was inside. Some believed it could hold the remains of Alexander the Great. Others thought it might belong to an unknown noble or military leader. But when archaeologists opened it, the reality was far stranger than anyone expected. Alexandria has always been a city full of mysteries. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, much of its ancient history is lost beneath the modern city and the waters of the Mediterranean. But every now and then, something buried for centuries comes to light. The Black Sarcophagus was found during routine excavation in the Sidi Gaber district, an area known for its archaeological significance. The moment construction workers hit something solid beneath the ground, it was clear this was not an ordinary find. The sarcophagus was enormous, 9 feet long, over 5 feet wide, and standing more than 6 feet tall. It was made entirely of black granite and sealed with an unusually thick layer of mortar, which meant it had remained completely untouched since ancient times. Given its size and the effort taken to seal it, archaeologists speculated that it had to contain something of great importance. Some even suggested it could finally be the lost tomb of Alexander the Great, whose burial site has never been found. Since he built the city that bears his name, many have speculated that he was laid to rest somewhere beneath it. But there was another theory, one that made some hesitant about disturbing the tomb. The idea that ancient tombs carry curses isn't new, and stories of misfortune following their opening have been told for centuries. From the so-called Curse of King Tut to unexplained deaths surrounding other tomb discoveries, there was no shortage of eerie speculation. Some locals even warned that opening the sarcophagus would unleash something ancient and dangerous. Despite the warnings, archaeologists proceeded. The world was watching, and the possibility of a major historical find was too great to ignore. But opening the sarcophagus wasn't easy. The sheer weight of the lid, estimated at over 15 tons, required heavy machinery to lift. The moment it was pried open, an unbearable stench filled the air. Inside, instead of treasures or a well-preserved mummy, the team found something disturbing. The sarcophagus was filled with a murky red liquid, and floating in it were the skeletal remains of 3 individuals. The liquid was a mix of groundwater and decomposed human remains, which had seeped in over centuries and created a grim, decayed sludge. The skeletons belonged to 2 men and 1 woman, but beyond that, little was immediately clear. What stood out was the lack of any markings, inscriptions, or artifacts, unusual for a tomb of this size. Most Egyptian burials included objects meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife, but this one had nothing. That absence only deepened the mystery. Who were these people? Why were they buried in such a massive, unmarked sarcophagus? And why had it been so securely sealed? Once the discovery was made public, wild theories began to spread. Some people believed the liquid inside had supernatural properties, leading to bizarre requests from individuals claiming they wanted to drink it to gain mystical powers. Others speculated that the burial was part of a lost ritual, possibly a failed attempt at mummification or a punishment of some kind. More rational explanations pointed to the possibility that the individuals inside were high-ranking military officials or nobles. The sheer size of the tomb suggested status, but the lack of inscriptions or burial objects suggested something unusual about the way they were interred. One theory suggests that they may have died suddenly, perhaps in an epidemic or battle, leading to a rushed and unceremonious battle. Another possibility is that the sarcophagus had been repurposed, originally intended for someone important, but later used as a communal grave. Despite all the speculation, no definitive answers were found. The skeletons were removed for further study, and the sarcophagus was transported for preservation. While it didn't contain Alexander the Great, it remains one of the most mysterious tombs uncovered in recent history. Its size, its unsettling contents, and the questions surrounding its purpose make it a discovery unlike any other. But Egypt isn't the only place where strange, ancient relics have surfaced. In a library in the Czech Republic sits a book so large and unusual that legends claim it was written with the help of the devil himself. Up next, the Devil's Bible. A book so massive, so detailed, and so unusual that for centuries, people believed it could not have been written by human hands alone. A book that carries a dark legend, that it was created with the help of the devil himself. This is the story of the Codex Gigas, more famously known as the Devil's Bible. The Codex Gigas is unlike any other medieval manuscript. It stands nearly 3 feet tall, weighs over 165 pounds, and is bound in wood and leather. But its size isn't the only thing that makes it mysterious. The book contains a full Latin Bible, historical text, medical knowledge, and exorcism rituals, all meticulously written in perfect uniform handwriting. And at the heart of it there's something even stranger, a chilling full-page portrait of the devil. The Devil's Bible was created in the early 13th century, likely in a Benedictine monastery, in what is now known as the Czech Republic. But who wrote it and why remains a mystery. The most famous legend tied to the book is one that has fascinated historians and paranormal enthusiasts alike. According to medieval accounts, the Codex Gigas was written by a monk who committed a terrible crime. As punishment, he was sentenced to be walled up alive, left to die in total isolation. Desperate to escape his fate, he made a plea. He promised to create the largest and most magnificent book the world had ever seen, one that would glorify God and contain all the knowledge of humanity. And he would do it in a single night. The task was impossible, even for the most skilled scribe. But as the night went on, the monk realized he wouldn't finish in time. Facing death, he turned to the only being who could help him, Satan. The story claims that he made a pact with the devil, offering his soul in exchange for the book's completion. By morning, the Codex Gigas was done, perfectly written and flawless in design. And as a mark of their deal, the monk dedicated an entire page to his new master, drawing a terrifying, full-body image of the devil. It's a compelling legend, but could there be any truth behind it? One of the most baffling aspects of the Codex Gigas is its uniform handwriting. Experts have analyzed every page and found that the text appears to be the work of a single individual. There are no noticeable differences in style, no interruptions in the flow of the ink, and according to modern estimates, writing a book of this size by hand should have taken at least 25 to 30 years. Yet the consistency suggests it was completed in an incredibly short period. How could one person have written all of it with such precision? The book's contents are also strange. Alongside biblical texts, it includes forbidden knowledge, grimoires detailing exorcisms, medical remedies, and even writings about demonology. Some believe this mixture of sacred and arcane knowledge points to something more than just religious devotion. The devil's portrait only deepens the mystery. It is unlike any other religious artwork from the time, showing Satan in a crouched position with clawed fingers, an elongated tongue, and glowing red eyes. Some believe the drawing itself carries an ominous presence, while others speculate it was a warning, a message left behind by the monk about the price he paid. But if the book wasn't created through supernatural means, how did one person manage such an enormous task? One theory is that the monk behind the Codex Gigas may have been suffering from a form of obsession or compulsion, what we might call hypergraphia today, an uncontrollable urge to write. Some researchers believe he may have been in a form of religious isolation, dedicating his life entirely to the manuscript. Another theory is that it was a collaborative effort, with later editions being carefully disguised to maintain the illusion of a single author. However, there is no evidence of multiple contributors. No shifts in handwriting, no changes in ink or style, and no corrections made over time. This has led some to suggest that the monk truly did work alone, possibly for decades, possibly under some unknown force driving him forward. The Codex Gigas also has a history of misfortune. Throughout the centuries, it's been looted, stolen, and moved across multiple countries. It was once kept in the Royal Library of Sweden, where it survived a massive fire. Witnesses claim that when the library caught fire in the 17th century, the book was thrown from a window to save it. It landed safely below, barely damaged, while much of the library burned. Some took this as a sign that the book was protected by something. Today, the Devil's Bible is kept in the National Library of Sweden under controlled conditions. Scholars continue to study its pages, but it still holds secrets that may never be fully understood. Who wrote it? How did they do it? And why did they dedicate an entire page to the devil? The answers remain lost in time. The Codex Gigas is a mystery locked within pages of ink and parchment. But not all mysteries are written down. Some are carved into the earth itself, hidden beneath layers of time, waiting to be uncovered. The next mystery is not about a single artifact or a cryptic book. It's about an entire civilization that simply disappeared. A culture that flourished for thousands of years before vanishing, leaving behind only fragments of its existence and a burning question. In the ancient shadows of the last ice age, a people walked the wild, frozen expanses of North America, their presence so fleeting that it would vanish almost as soon as it began. We call them the Clovis. They were hunters of giants, shaping flint and stone into deadly, elegant spear points that could pierce the thick hides of mammoths and ancient bison. With these tools so perfect, so uniform across thousands of miles, it was clear they were more than scattered tribes. They were a civilization bound together by shared knowledge, perhaps even by an unspoken promise that the land itself could be mastered. For centuries, the Clovis were thought to be the first to brave this raw continent, crossing the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia when ice retreated just enough to let them slip south. Wherever they went, they left traces, bone beds filled with butchered giants, stone blades that gleamed with purpose. It was as if they materialized fully formed, a people destined to conquer a savage world, and yet, as abruptly as they appeared, they vanished. Around 12,800 years ago, their signature fluted points ceased to appear. Campsites went cold. Mammoth bones no longer bore the marks of human blades. The Clovis disappeared so completely that it looked like the earth itself had swallowed them. For generations, no one could say why. There were no great battlefields littered with bones, no mass graves or signs of starvation. The land was simply emptied of their story. But perhaps the answer was written in the sky. Some believe a comet or asteroid hurtled out of the darkness, striking the earth with a fury beyond imagination. Fires raged from horizon to horizon, smoke and soot blotting out the sun. In the aftermath came the cold, a sudden return to Ice Age conditions known as the Younger Dryas. For creatures that roamed the grasslands, this was an extinction, and for the Clovis, whose survival was tied to those doomed herds, it was a reckoning. At the bottom of ancient lake beds, archaeologists have found a thin, dark layer of carbon, black mats laced with tiny diamonds, forged in cosmic violence. If this layer is proof, then the Clovis were among the first human victims of a global catastrophe. Yet the truth is murkier than legend. Some scholars argue that no apocalypse is needed to explain their disappearance. Instead, as the mammoths died and the climate shifted, the Clovis adapted. They turned to smaller prey, changed the way they hunted, and became the Folsom people and the countless other tribes that followed. In this telling, they didn't die out. They evolved, shedding the old ways like the last ice melting from the mountains. But there were other stranger clues. Deep in Chile, far beyond where the Clovis were thought to roam, lie sites older than any of their tools. Monteverde suggests that other humans walked these lands thousands of years before the Clovis ever raised a spear. If this is true, the Clovis were not the first Americans, but a chapter in a much longer, hidden epic. Perhaps they were a splinter of some older migration, or the final bloom of a people who had come and gone long before their name was etched into our histories. And so the Clovis remain an enigma, proof of how quickly a people can rise, flourish, and disappear, leaving behind only fragments of their story. Their tools lie silent in the dust, like messages from a vanished world, daring us to imagine the lives behind them. Across the world, entire cities have vanished beneath the waves, leaving behind only scattered ruins and whispered stories. Off the coast of Europe, beneath the waves of the North Sea, lies evidence of an even greater loss. A land that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, teeming with life, home to thousands of people, until one day it was gone. This is a story of Doggerland, the prehistoric civilization lost to time and tide, a place where humans once thrived before nature erased it completely. Tens of thousands of years ago, the world was a very different place. Much of the Earth's water was locked in vast ice sheets, lowering sea levels and exposing massive land masses that are now hidden beneath the oceans. One of these lost lands was Doggerland, a vast stretch of land that once connected present-day Britain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. It wasn't just a barren plain, it was a thriving ecosystem, a landscape of rolling hills, wide rivers, and dense forests. For thousands of years, it was home to early humans, hunter-gatherers who followed migrating herds, fished its waters, and built their lives in a world now lost beneath the sea. The first hints of Doggerland's existence came not from history books or ancient texts, but from fishermen. For centuries, trawlers working the North Sea have pulled up strange artifacts, tools, bones, and even ancient skulls, all dredged up from the seabed. Some of these remains belong to animals like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, while others clearly came from humans, evidence that people had once walked across this submerged world. But it wasn't until the 20th century that scientists began to understand what they were dealing with. Advances in sonar mapping and underwater archaeology revealed something astonishing: an entire prehistoric landscape frozen in time beneath the waves. Riverbeds, hills, even the faint outlines of what might have been settlements were mapped out under the North Sea. What had once been a lush, inhabitable land was now a vast, empty seabed. So what happened? Doggerland didn't disappear overnight, but rather through a slow and relentless process. As the Ice Age ended and temperatures rose, glaciers melted, causing sea levels to rise. Slowly, year by year, the waters crept in, forcing its inhabitants to retreat. But then, around 8,000 years ago, something catastrophic happened, an event that sealed Doggerland's fate. It's known as the Stega Slide, one of the largest underwater landslides ever recorded. Somewhere off the coast of Norway, a massive chunk of seabed collapsed, triggering a mega tsunami. Walls of water, some reaching over 30 feet high, crashed into Doggerland's coastline, swallowing villages, drowning forests, and sweeping entire communities away. What had been a sprawling land bridge between Britain and Europe was suddenly cut off, fragmented into islands before vanishing completely beneath the waves. For the people living there, the Stega tsunami must have been apocalyptic. Some may have survived, fleeing to higher ground in Britain or continental Europe. Others were likely caught in the waves, their homes and lives erased in a matter of hours. And just like that, Doggerland was gone. But could some remnants still be hiding beneath the sea? The North Sea is an unforgiving place for archaeologists. Its waters are murky, its seabed constantly shifting. But over the years, new discoveries have continued to emerge. Human tools, fragments of wood structures, and even ancient footprints preserved in mud, offering a glimpse into the lives of Doggerland's last inhabitants. In 2018, researchers using advanced sonar detected what appeared to be evidence of ancient human settlements buried under layers of sediment. Some even believe that entire villages, perhaps even burial sites, could still be out there, perfectly preserved beneath the seabed. But perhaps the biggest question of all is whether Doggerland could ever be fully explored. Unlike other lost civilizations, this one is hidden under a shallow but treacherous sea where storms and currents make underwater exploration incredibly difficult. Even with modern technology, much of it remains out of reach, a ghostly landscape buried beneath the North Sea. Still, the legend of Doggerland continues to grow. Some researchers believe it was the inspiration for later myths, the idea of a sunken homeland, a once great civilization lost beneath the waves. Could it be that stories of a lost land passed down through generations eventually morphed into the Atlantis legend? For now, Doggerland remains a land of speculation, a place we know existed but can never truly visit. The discovery of Doggerland's lost civilization proves just how much of our history is buried beneath the waves, whole worlds we never knew existed, erased by time and nature. But sometimes, history isn't hidden beneath the sea. Sometimes it turns up in the most unexpected places, buried beneath the soil, waiting to rewrite everything we thought we knew. But not every mystery involves lost artifacts or unexplored lands. Some mysteries are right in front of us, carved into the very stones of the past. And one of the most striking of these enigmas lies in the heart of Egypt, the unfinished Obelisk of Aswan, a monument that, had it been completed, would have been the largest of its kind. Yet, for some reason, the ancient Egyptians abandoned it, leaving it frozen in time, still half carved from the bedrock. Aswan, Egypt, is home to some of the most remarkable feats of ancient engineering. It was here, in vast quarries along the Nile, that the Egyptians cut the colossal stone blocks used to build their temples and obelisks. These quarries supplied the raw material for some of the most iconic structures in the world, including the great temples of Karnak and Luxor. But among these, one stands out, not because it was completed, but because it never was. The unfinished obelisk lies embedded in the rock, partially carved and cracked, an abandoned giant measuring over 137 feet long and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. If it had been finished and erected, it would have been the tallest and heaviest obelisk in Egypt, larger than any that now stand in places like Karnak or even in Rome, where many Egyptian obelisks were later transported. Yet, for reasons unknown, it was left unfinished, forgotten for thousands of years. Historians estimate that the obelisk was being carved during the reign of Queen Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most powerful and mysterious pharaohs, who ruled in the 15th century BC. Known for her ambitious building projects, Hatshepsut commissioned some of the most impressive temples and monuments of the time, including the famous obelisks that still stand in Karnak. But unlike those, this one never left the quarry. The most widely accepted theory for why the obelisk was left unfinished is that a massive crack appeared in the stone as workers were carving it from the bedrock. This flaw would have made it impossible to transport or erect, rendering the entire project useless. The Egyptians, known for their precision and skill in stone cutting, may have decided that rather than wasting time trying to salvage it, they would abandon it and start over elsewhere. But some scholars believe the story isn't that simple. The Egyptians were masters of stonework, and their techniques for quarrying and moving massive blocks of stone were highly advanced for their time. Some believe that if the crack were the only issue, they may have found a way to repurpose parts of the obelisk instead of leaving it entirely behind. This raises the question, was there another reason it was abandoned? One alternative theory is that the project was cursed or seen as an omen of bad luck. Ancient Egyptians were deeply spiritual, and they believed that divine signs could dictate the fate of construction projects. If a major crack appeared, it could have been interpreted as a warning from the gods, an indication that the obelisk should never be completed. In a civilization where religious beliefs were intertwined with daily life and leadership, it's possible that such a sign would have been taken seriously. Others suggest that the obelisk was simply too ambitious. Even though the Egyptians had successfully transported massive obelisks before, this one was significantly larger than anything attempted before. Moving an object of this size and weight would have required an unprecedented level of planning and manpower. Some experts speculate that once the full scale of the challenge became apparent, the project was quietly abandoned in favor of more practical endeavors. What makes the unfinished obelisks even more fascinating is what it reveals about ancient Egyptian quarrying techniques. The site shows clear evidence of how these massive monuments were carved, using a method that is still not fully understood. The Egyptians didn't use metal chisels to cut the hard granite. Instead, they used dolerite, a type of extremely hard stone, to pound away at the rock. Workers would have painstakingly chipped away at the stone with dolerite balls, creating deep trenches around the obelisk to free it from the bedrock. There are also curious tool marks and trenches visible along the length of the obelisk, evidence of an ancient worksite frozen in time. Some researchers believe that studying these markings can help us better understand how the Egyptians managed to construct and move their massive stone structures, techniques that are still debated by historians and engineers today. But there are even stranger aspects to the obelisk that some believe suggest an advanced or lost technology. The way the stone was shaped is so precise that some have suggested the possibility of tools or methods that we don't fully understand. Did the Egyptians have knowledge of construction techniques that have since been lost to history? Some alternative theorists proposed that advanced methods, possibly involving high-powered tools or techniques we have yet to discover, may have played a role in quarrying and shaping these immense structures. Despite mainstream explanations, the unfinished obelisk has attracted its share of alternative theories. Some researchers question whether the Egyptians alone could have moved stones of such enormous size using only wooden sledges, ropes, and manpower. This has led to speculation that they may have had assistance from an unknown source, whether that means an undiscovered ancient technology, an advanced civilization that predated them, or even theories that lean into more controversial territory, such as extraterrestrial intervention. While such ideas are often dismissed by mainstream scholars, it's undeniable that the techniques used to build many of Egypt's great monuments remain a mystery. Even today, engineers debate how some of these structures were created, how blocks weighing hundreds of tons were lifted into place with primitive tools, and why so many unfinished or abandoned projects, like the unfinished obelisk, exist. Another idea suggests that the unfinished obelisk wasn't abandoned at all, but rather left intentionally. Could it have been a training ground for quarry workers? Some archaeologists believe that the workers practiced on the obelisk before moving on to smaller, more manageable projects. This would explain why the site is covered in tool marks and trenches, evidence of generations of workers honing their skills. Others speculate that the obelisk abandonment might have been due to a change in political power. If Queen Hatshepsut was overthrown, or if priorities shifted to other construction projects, the workforce may have simply been redirected elsewhere, leaving the massive monument frozen in time. Today, the unfinished Obelisk of Aswan stands as a silent reminder of both the ambition and the limits of ancient civilizations. It's a site where time seems to have stopped, where visitors can still see the marks left by hands that worked on it thousands of years ago. Whether it was abandoned due to structural failure, religious superstition, or simply practicality, the obelisk offers us a rare glimpse into an ancient world, a world that was both incredibly advanced and, at the same time, still bound by the laws of nature. It remains one of the largest mysteries of ancient engineering, a testament to what could have been had history played out just a little differently. And yet, it is only one of many such anomalies across the world, places and objects that defy explanation, structures that hint at a deeper, forgotten past. The unfinished Obelisk of Aswan remains a stark reminder of ancient engineering feats left incomplete. These are only a few of the countless enigmas that history has left us, mysteries so compelling they have outlived empires. In each ruin, each weathered inscription, a secret sleeps, waiting for the curious, the dreamers, the night wanderers who dare to ask questions. Tonight, as you close your eyes, know that you are part of this ancient lineage of seekers. You have traveled from the heights of Delphi to the depths of the Clovis, from the roar of Codex Gigas to the silent Cyclopean walls. You have brushed against the invisible, felt the hush of forgotten rites, and glimpsed the glimmer of truths beyond explanation.